Hi class, Mr. Calderin here with a quick video review as to what you need for your unit exam tomorrow. Tomorrow you're going to be confronted with a brand new literary text. It's going to be a short story that you've never seen before, and I'd like you to read that short story and be able to identify and discuss the literary elements that we've learned about through our reading of other short stories. So things like setting, what it is, and how the author uses it in the story to create meaning, like a mood or an atmosphere. Um, Characterization, and how an author develops a particular character. Is it a round or a flat character, static or dynamic? What kinds of details does the author mention to tell you about that character's motivations, that character's personality, okay, the psychology of that character? Uh, I'm also going to expect you to know things like the plot, how to identify when the climax of the plot is, for example, or when an author is using suspense or foreshadowing or using a twist ending to add an additional experience to the reading. Uh, Most importantly, you're going to also need to know theme, how the conflict in the story leads up to and exposes a certain theme, and that the theme is a general statement usually about people or life that can be summed up in a sentence or two, and often has a lot of weight to it. There's often something that is revealed throughout the decisions a character makes or the way a story develops, that authors intend and that we as readers make meaning of. We use interpretation to make that meaning. So what's a study for this test? Well, there is a series of notes that I've given you throughout the past few weeks called What Makes Up Short Story. You can find those notes from our course calendar on our main page. I'll put a link to it right below this video too. Another thing is, I mentioned that you should be familiar with the stories By the Waters of Babylon, Ленingen versus the Ants, and of course the short story you read for your own literary analysis. I'm not going to ask you very specific questions perhaps about the plot or about the characters in those stories per se, but I will expect that you bring an understanding of those stories to your interpretation of a new short story. So just to give you an example, I might say the conflict of Ленingen versus the ants seemed to be mostly between Ленingen and the ants. That's right in the title. But we can also talk about that as a conflict between man and nature, and how Ленingen, as a man, used his resources, or rather his resourcefulness and his resources, and also his other crewmates, to defeat and hold back this enemy, and ultimately he's victorious. So I might say, okay, the conflict in Ленingen versus the ants is character versus nature. In this new short story, how would you identify the conflict? And how does the conflict in this short story compare to the one from Ленingen versus the ants? So I'm going to expect you to be fluent in conversing about that short story and using your experience with that to make sense of a new short story. What else? You'll be safe, and you should feel confident going into this exam if you review those notes about how to determine short stories, if you spend some time looking through what we discussed about specific things short story authors do to add meaning to their stories, such as, for instance, adding elements of suspense, foreshadowing, a surprise twist ending, or developing just a couple of characters very thoroughly, because there just isn't enough time to do it. Sticking to one specific plot line, okay, instead of going out into developing subplots, and usually center around a single inciting incident, a single event that leads up to a climax that's well determined. It's kind of short and compact. Right? It is a short story, but I want you to know so much more than just it's short. So that's about it in a nutshell. If you have any questions about the format, you can expect the majority of the test to be in the form of long answers. I won't have an entire essay question for you, but I'll have a series of long answer questions asking you to consider different kinds of literary elements. For instance, in the news story, I might say, select 2 quotes and explain them from the short story that reveals how the author uses setting. Okay, so then you can go through and read through the short story and determine, this descriptive detail really captures the time and the place of the story and adds to an overall mood. These quotes do this, and I'll explain why. Or I might give you a question such as, discuss in your own words the theme of this story. Create a thesis statement as if you were to write an essay, and provide some explanations as to some examples as to why that you feel that is the theme of the short story. So you're going to be giving me an entirely unique interpretation of your story based upon the evidence that you have in front of you, only in the text, and your knowledge of short stories overall, your other experiences. So check it out. This is kind of how I imagine it, if you can follow this analogy. Throughout the past few weeks, we've been learning how to bat, how to pitch, how to field the ball, how to run bases, perhaps steal a base, and how to read different signs as a catcher. Now, tomorrow, I'm asking you to play ball. You're just going out there and playing the game and see what happens with what you've learned. Okay. I'm going to open up a discussion forum. You can ask questions of me or of your fellow classmates. Feel free to help each other out as you review this evening. Links to the stories that we've read are available in our classroom calendar if you filter through. And it's not a bad idea just to go through that calendar for yourself and refresh your memory as to where we've come since the beginning. Okay, I hope this video review was helpful. I am after school today for more specific and directed help if you have specific questions. And good luck with your study. See you tomorrow.